Firstly, in the event of a fire, please make your way to the nearest fire exit, which is through these doors here and through towards the lift. Please do not use the lift and use the staircase next to the lift down to the ground floor, following the signage and exiting the building. There is a secondary escape route at the back of the chamber, round through offices, again to a staircase down to the ground floor. Out of consideration and courtesy for speakers, please can you put your electronic devices onto silent or turn them off. Thank you very much. And as I previously said, given the climate in here, if members want to remove their jackets, they're quite welcome to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to now formally open the meeting. First of all, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For all the Conservative group, we have received apologies from Councillor Partridge Underwood, Councillor Nicol, Councillor Sims, Councillor Kevin Thurland, Councillor JP Carr, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Prentice, Councillor Jelly, Councillor O'Hara, Councillor Brown, Councillor David Jenny, Councillor Stephen North, Councillor Tim Allibone, and Councillor Richard Lavelle. That's from the Conservative group. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor, just to confirm, that's Councillor Sedwin Brown.
Yes, indeed, Councillor Sedwin Brown. I beg your pardon. Thank you.
Councillor Matt Keane, please.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Labour Group, we have apologies from Councillor Colquhoun and Councillor Leanne Buckingham, and some of our councillors may need to leave at 4 due to work commitments as well.
Thank you, Councillor.
And Simon, Councillor Riley is running late. He'll be here shortly.
Councillor Haycrawl, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have apologies from the Alliance Group of Councillor Dell, Fedorovich, Tubbs and Best. Thank you.
Nice to see you here anyway, Jim.
If you have young councillors, they do amazing things at this time of year.
Thank you. Mr. Gold, any more apologies, please?
No, Chair.
Are there any other apologies to be recorded? Councillor Bone?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not apologies. Councillor Eakins is on his way, but probably held up in item.
Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of May, 2022. Are there any issues in relation to the accuracy of the minutes? Nothing heard? Thank you. I would like to move the minutes of the 26th of May. Please may I see a seconder? Councillor Smithers, thank you. Please may I see those in favour of the minutes? Those against? Abstentions? All in favour of your chairman then, are you? Thank you. Declaration of interest, please. Are there any declaration of interest that councillors wish to make related to the item to be discussed? Councillor Howes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion number 2, I need to declare a personal interest and leave the room. Thank you.
Councillor Weatherall?
Similarly for that same motion.
Any more, please? Mark, you looked as if you were... No? Sorry? Any declarations of interest?
Chair, under the rules, we must declare exactly what that interest is.
Chair, I would expect that we would declare the nature of the interest. We don't have to go into exact specifics, but the nature would be good for transparency reasons.
Does that answer that? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm more than happy to say that I have a personal interest in my portfolio with HMOs. Thank you.
Similarly, have a HMO portfolio.
Thank you. Chair's announcements. There's only one thing I would like to say that you may find of interest is that there is a circus coming to Corby from the 30th of June to the 4th of July. I've been asked to formally open it. I was very worried about this, but the officers assured me I had so much skill in this direction. But anyway, the good thing about it is, and there is a flyer, it's called the Cortex Travelling Circus, but it's made up of Ukrainians. So about 70 to 80% of those taking part, and I'm going on the first night. I've had a look at it all online, and a lot of these people have come out of the Ukraine since the problems, and the tickets are only £9.99 each, I believe. So I just thought you might like to get your children and your grandchildren and your neighbours' kids and get on down there. The tickets are all available online. But I just throw that in. Leaders' announcements, please. Please may I see the Leader of the Council to make a brief announcement. Brief, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will try and keep this very brief. Colleagues, as many of you may already be aware, the local government family of Northamptonshire has lost a very dear friend. Ian Morris sadly passed away this week after a short illness. Many of you would have known Ian for the weekly COVID press briefing sessions which he chaired with absolute distinction. Ian was a true gentleman and was liked by his peers across all political colours. Ian served on Northamptonshire County Council's executive and always gave 100% no matter what that challenge put in front of him. His ability to understand complex issues and find solutions were all part of what made Ian so very special. Ian also possessed a great sense of humour, which at times would put people at ease. Ian also enjoyed the arts. He was a great supporter of the Royal and Derngate Theatre, where he was also a trustee, a role he immensely enjoyed after temporarily stepping back from local politics. My condolences go out to Ian and his family at this difficult time. And I would like to invite you all to stand and give a round of applause to recognise Ian's contribution and work in making Northamptonshire a better place.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor McGee, you wish to say something, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would. Chair, although we were on the opposite sides of the political divide, I had a lot of respect for Ian, who always worked hard as a councillor. In fact, in the couple of portfolios that I knew I worked on in highways, and indeed the latter one where he had public health, he worked extremely hard, and especially during the pandemic. He held the meetings, he made sure everybody got the help and information they needed during that difficult time. I didn't always agree with Ian, that's what happens in politics, but he was always willing to listen and indeed at times take things on board that we and I, as his opposite number, said, even when it was portfolio for highways, which his predecessor never did. But we won't go down there, Chair. But Chair, I admired and respected what I do admire and respect most about Ian was he's straightforward. He was very straightforward. Indeed, he was a very humble person. He got on with his tasks quietly and proficiently, and he did them well. Chair, he had a great love for the theatre. I met him many times and discussed it. Chair, and I think his passing away, unfortunately, is a great loss to the whole of Northamptonshire, especially at such a young age. It's a great loss to the whole of Northamptonshire, and our group's sympathies and deepest respects goes out to all his family and friends.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hakewell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just endorse the comments that have already been made. I met Ian, obviously, on the County Council, and he always had the right demeanour, and he was always full of humour, but at the same time pragmatic to get the job done that was being carried out. And it was a great shock to me, and I very much enjoyed being with him inside and what one might call outside the tent. So my condolences too. And I think, according to how the arrangements are, it would be good, Mr. Chairman, if we could know the funeral arrangements could be circulated on the assumption that we're allowed, because I, for one, would quite like to go. So I don't know if you can expedite that, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can't we, Paul?
Sure.
Thank you. Hopefully that'll be done by Paul's office. Agenda item 6, colleagues, public participation. We will now move to the public participation agenda item. Please may I see Mr. Blissett, who wishes to speak in relation to agenda item 11 and the motion on the travellers stopping site. Mr. Blissett, you have 3 minutes to address the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. I won't read it all out, as you have a hard copy in an email. Northamptonshire Council has not abided by the strict criteria set out by yourselves by not carrying out the proper consultations with the local council residents and some of those within 200 metres. I believe no consultation with the Wildlife Trust either. With only 13 days to comment on, this included the bank holiday of the Queen's Jubilee. That should have been 6 to 8 weeks. Rothwell Town Council have been led to believe over the last year or so that they could have this piece of land as a green canopy country park. Northamptonshire Council Gypsy and Traveller Allocation Consultation starts with the public at the end of June and is published in 24. Why have they ignored the facts that the temporary stopping site should be part of that consultation, not approved prior to the consultation? This is a beautiful site, environmentally rich with a stream running through it. Because of its topographical nature is not being farmed for 30 years, is not suitable for a temporary stopping place for gypsies. There are more suitable sites available in better locations. Farmers are being lobbied to create these green spaces, so why do we want to destroy this one? They say they did consider another 8 sites, and in their opinion, this was the one they picked. This was all done secretly behind closed doors. No one was aware of it or was consulted. Another issue is, in Rothwell, the services can't stand anything else. There's 700 houses being built, no extensions to the doctor's surgery or the schools. As I understand it, the council were aware of the £10 million funding on the 22nd of March and didn't notify anybody until the 18th of May, again totally unacceptable, to give less than 2 weeks consultation period, including a bank holiday. This is the only temporary stopping place, so why does it have to be in the countryside where construction costs are horrendous and a few services available and having to cross very fast main roads to get into the town? Who is going to police the site? Where is the business plan? And I don't believe there is one to date. Who will collect the rents? Who will police it on a 7-day basis? At what cost to the taxpayers? There are traffic issues every morning where the A14 is stationary, vehicles are backing up onto the A6, into Rothwell, Harrington and the lorry park. I hope you will all support motion 1 for all the reasons I have pointed out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blissett. Agenda item 7, councillors. These relates to councillors' questions. Moving on to questions submitted by councillors. Please, can we take these as read and the answers given? No objections to that? Thank you. No, I'm going to go through, yeah. To go through each one and to ask if there's any supplementary question. Councillor Martin Griffiths, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the response and the welcome measures that confirm that not only do the Trust not support a brand new hospital and site, but this council does not support a brand new hospital in site. Can I ask that the leader speaks to our two of our MPs who are still giving mixed messages about the building of a brand new hospital on a green site? My question, however, what does the leader suggest I say to my constituents about the broken promises and delays about this vital piece of infrastructure in North Northamptonshire? Thank you.
Councillor Smithers, leader, please.
Chairman, I'm not sure why Councillor Griffiths thinks it's a broken promise, because we, as an authority, are completely behind this. We have tried and done everything we can possible with the preparation of a local development order, which also helps develop things on the site quickly. We provided this that gives rights for specific types of development within locations on the site, thereby negating the need for certain planning applications. This only serves to accelerate the development. Myself and the Chief Executive have had meetings with the Chief Executive of the hospital, and we are fully supportive of this new hospital. And I have had meetings with the MPs who are also lobbying very hard for the money to come forward, which I hope over the coming months we will see that. But let's leave this under no illusions. This authority is 100% behind getting the new Boris Hospital here in Kettering.
Thank you, Councillor Smithers. Move on to question 2. You've seen the question by Councillor Anne Lee and the response by Councillor Binley. Councillor Lee, do you have any supplementary question, please?
Yes, please, Chair. Will priority be given to the implementation of proposals to deal with the backlog, given the huge inconvenience of a backlog of repairs for our social tenants?
Councillor Binley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As detailed in the response, it is something that the team are currently putting a plan together to deal with this, Chair. One of the things that we as a team are currently doing is trying to quantify exactly how we have ended up with the backlogs that we have. Of course, I know it is an overused phrase, but we have to be realistic. COVID has had a huge part to play on this, Chair. What we are now doing is sitting down to look at how to best deal with the outstanding jobs that we have to deal with across the entire area, so that's Kettering and Corby, in a timely fashion, and of course within the budgets of the HRA.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. Question 3, again, Councillor Lee, you've seen Councillor Lee's question. You've seen Councillor Binley's reply. Councillor Lee, do you have any supplementary question, please?
Can allowance be made for brief periods of absence at school drop-off and pick-up times, especially for emergency repairs, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think that might be a slightly difficult thing to actually deal with, Chair, as unless we're going to start paying staff out of hours allowances, our staff have core hours that they need to work. And of course, whilst I appreciate the question in what you're asking, please don't forget that, as you will see in the written answer that I have provided, that appointments are made. So if a tenant fails to be there, with the greatest of respect, it's that they have failed to turn up at the time that they have made the appointment for. And of course, we will, by all means, we will continue to work with tenants to make sure that we accommodate their needs wherever we possibly can, especially for those most important jobs.
Thank you, Councillor. Question 4. You've seen Councillor McGee's question. You've seen Councillor Smithers' answer. Councillor McGee, do you have any supplementary question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just the one. I appreciate there has been some excellent training given, but Chair, we would like the charter as soon as possible. I understand that does take time. But Chair, can we have a process where any member that wants to go training for an outside body can apply quite straightforward to democratic support and get an answer quickly so they can do bodies that we may not always use?
Thank you. And as in my response to this question, you will see that we are beginning a learning and development policy which will shape the future of training for all councillor members. And what I would encourage is that every member has an input into that and shapes that policy so it's right for Northamptonshire. So I would encourage Councillor McGee to take, and I'm sure he will, take a full part in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 5, councillors. You've seen Councillor Lynn Buckingham's question. You've seen Councillor Bundy's answer. Councillor Buckingham. Lynn Buckingham, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Thank you. It's just along the timelines of implementation for a protocol to come in place. Could you possibly give me a sort of rough estimate of when that could be?
Councillor Bundy, please.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. I will try to give it as much priority as I can, and I will speak to members and officers to see whether we can get a timeline sorted out quickly for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Question 6. You've seen the question from Councillor Lynn Buckingham, and you've seen the reply from David Brackenbury. Councillor Buckingham, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for the reply. Thank you very much for the equality screening assessment. At the end of Councillor Brackenbury's reply, it says an assessment of the ramped access to the railway station car park will also be conducted over the summer. However, within the equality impact assessment, on page, it doesn't give page numbers, but it's 2 pages in, under the pedestrian steps, in bold lettering, it says that unfortunately, because of the constraints on the budget, the ramped access isn't going ahead. So can you explain, you know, if the ramped access isn't going ahead, how can it be assessed?
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham, for your question, and I certainly see the point that you make. As I understand it, there is ramped access, but it does require a somewhat slightly further moving forward. Slightly further to go to access the alternative route. I do see what you're saying in the equality impact assessment, and I'm happy to liaise with officers and get back to you to clarify the position as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Agenda item 8, councillors, executive presentations. Oh, was it? Where did that go? Sorry. That's the first one. Well, oh, there it is, halfway down the page. Yes, you've seen the question from Councillor Lynn Buckingham and Councillor Brackenbury's reply. Councillor Buckingham, do you have any supplementary question, please?
Not on this one, thank you. And thank you very much for the reply, Councillor Brackenbury.
Sorry I missed you. Right. Agenda item 8, executive presentations. There are no executive presentations on this occasion. Agenda item 9, councillors, the review of electoral arrangements. Please may I see the monitoring officer to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware that the Boundary Commission are undertaking an electoral review of North Northamptonshire Council. The first stage of that is to determine the council size for the next ordinary election. So in regard to that, the Council and the Democracy and Standards Committee established a cross-party working group some time ago, and that working group has been working towards a proposal for members today. The member working group has considered the implications for the Council in reducing the councillor numbers below 78, keeping them at the current level and also increasing them. So also as agreement in terms of background evidence and information at Appendix A, the majority of the working group proposed a total of 99 councillors for future size. That was then endorsed by the Democracy and Standards Committee for recommendation to Council. Alternative views were presented to both the working group and the Democracy and Standards group by the Labour group and the Green Alliance group, and those are set out in more detail within the background papers to this report. In considering the evidence provided, it's the recommendation of the Democracy and Standards Committee that a council size of 99 councillors goes forward. Chair, with your permission, I believe that Councillor Lawman's going to move this report.
Councillor Lawman, please.
This one, Chairman. Thank you very much. We have already moved apart from each other. Perhaps I should change my name back to my maiden name. First of all, I would like to thank our officers who have worked diligently with the members of the Boundary Changes Working Group, and of course also those members from cross-party who helped and found this report. Basically, you will hopefully have gone through the first many pages giving you the template. The council size submission template is set by the Boundary Commission, and it was our duty to go through every single area of that, and we have done diligently. We have provided all evidence that our council, with a current 78 members, going forward and based on our future growth, which is also evidenced as North Northamptonshire or Northamptonshire as a whole is a very fast growing area. We have evidence that with ONS figures and everything else, and if you wouldn't mind turning to page 54, you see the calculation based then on a survey, a councillor survey that we conducted, and we had more than 50% of councillors who responded to assess their average working pattern based on whether it was committee work, council work, parish council, town council work, or constituents work. Based on that, we arrived at 42 hours, roughly as an estimate in a week. We then looked at the executive, who we know work many more hours in excess of that. We also looked at the chairman and vice chairman, but it would have been undue to just load the committee by those figures. So then based on new committees, we have and will have and should be looking at in the future, we came up with, for instance, a Greenway board, which required 6 councillors, assets, 5, strategic grants, 6, small grants, 6. Future executive assistants could be, say, 2. New members to accommodate that, the new committees, using others as well and redistributing, so to speak, members, another 4. That would have been 29 members. We are under no illusion that the Boundary Commission would never believe us that we would have a requirement for 29. So when we worked through that, obviously there are councillors who sit on very few committees, and perhaps if it is more evenly distributed, we then arrive at 10 extra councillors going forward to 2031 and 2041. That immediate need then, if I can call it that, would be 88 members. Based on all the data we've been submitted with on growth figures, the lowest growth figure is 13%, and that's 88 times 30 plus 13% arrives at 99. We have given all the evidence, whether it is on outside organizations or the many, many parish councils and town councils our members are sitting on. And you find the list in appendices 1, 2, and so on. Strategic outside bodies, and I must admit, it was quite an impressive read of how many areas we are actually representing North Northamptonshire Council. So with all of that, we believe as a group, and it came into the Democracy and Standards Committee, that 99 councillors is the right figure going forward to lead us into a better position in the future. It also provides then for those committees, say for instance, if in the event that the Child Trust would come back to us in 3 years' time, that would increase our workload tremendously. It will also provide for that and many, many other functions where we can streamline and adjust the current pattern we have. So I believe, and the committee believed, because it was basically a unanimous decision on the text of the submission document, of the draft submission. The calculation was a slightly different matter, but that is opinions and how you calculate it. Our remit was not to look at any cost implication, nor any requirements on a room, but I have received assurance that we could be accommodated if the figure goes to 99 councillors going forward and agreed by the Boundary Commission. So this is phase 1. We desperately need the decision now, hopefully in August, September time, from the Boundary Commission to agree with our figure or tell us otherwise, and then go into the next phase to look at the future ward patterns. So nothing like that is reflected here, Chairman, and I don't believe any discussion should be had on either remuneration, there's a place afterwards, because we have made mention there that if we want to attract younger councillors or other councillors who are perhaps working at the moment, if they have to take a decision between wanting to become a councillor or not, then obviously that package needs to be right as well. So without any further ado, I move the recommendation as agreed by the Democracy and Standards Committee for your decision. Thank you.
Councillor. Jill. Sorry.
That's the wrong button. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as the Deputy for that working group, I would like to second that motion, and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I'm sure there's probably one or two of you who want to speak. Matt Keane, I've got your name down first, but thank you.
So firstly, I'd like to thank the other members of the working group for the work put into the document. It wasn't unanimous, and as the Labour representative on the group, I arrived at a different number as did the Green Alliance. But I would say we all worked well together and understood the different views that members had brought to the table. I'd like to thank the officers and the Boundary Commission for the hard work that they put in sourcing figures and getting the data for us. I would say that the uniform idea of using the county wards ×3 on the current council hasn't worked. A lot of our areas do not reflect the communities we represent, and the electorate sizes are greatly different ward to ward. I think that some of our wards are too big, so I'll be looking forward to the next part of the consultation, which has been looking at the warding arrangements in future. This is a golden opportunity to get this council right and fit for purpose for the next 15 to 20 years. Northamptonshire will look very different in 20 years' time. When Max Caller gave his initial recommendations in setting the council to the recommendation, he recommended as few as 45 councillors, which in my opinion was far too small. So when we arrived at 78, I think this was about right. I'd agree this is a fair number. The tweaks that need to go into are to go into the warding arrangements and future growth areas. So with a population growth of 14% expected for Northamptonshire, I think it's important that we represent these areas of growth effectively. I think 99 is too high and too expensive, but I do agree that a small increase is necessary, which is what the Labour group proposed in 84 councillors. This is in line with population growth, and it's so we can represent our electorate efficiently. So unfortunately, I can't support voting for the 99 number.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Griffiths, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, in my opinion, this report and its recommendations are bordering on cloud cuckoo land. There is a lot about member workload in the report. Well, many of you in this chamber pushed, some vehemently, for a total member-led council. Well, you've got what you wanted. With a hell of a lot of hard work, an executive making all the key decisions, the desire for this council to be committee-led, long forgotten, and an officer team being micromanaged, under pressure and browbeaten, and looking for alternative positions elsewhere. Having met Max Caller on more than one occasions, I remind everybody that he mentioned 45 members for Northamptonshire. But Max Caller didn't just write the best value inspection report that brought us where we are today. Max Caller was also the commissioner at Tower Hamlets, Liverpool Council, a former chief executive of the London boroughs of Hackney and Barnet, and the former chair of the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. That says it all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorothy Maxwell, please.
I welcome this report. I think it's excellent. I feel that there are just a couple of points I would like to make, however. I think on page 25, 2.4, where it says about the bus service, clearly, at the moment, we're no further forward. And this has been like this for some years, where bus services in small villages don't exist. Equally, if you were a councillor without a car, you wouldn't be able to get there because of the bus services. So I think that's the first point that needs looking at. Secondly, with COVID-19 now actually finishing, or we hope it's finishing, I'd like to say that I think that there will be an increase in the workload because COVID-19 restricted some of the things we were actually able to do. So I think that needs to be taken into account when requesting these numbers. I do agree with them, so I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scott Brown, please.
Thank you, Chair. When I first saw this proposal, it sparked an immediate interest for me. I'd recently learnt of Max Caller's original proposal for NNC to have a council numbering 45 members. The disparity in the suggestion from him and the 99 proposed in this report struck me as quite significant. I decided to complete some research for myself. For the purposes of this research, I took the unitary councils in England, along with their member numbers, their current population, and their projected populations for 2032. I removed all unitary councils below a population of 250,000, all city unitary councils, and all London borough unitary councils from consideration, given that I felt it would make for an unfair comparison. This left me with 16 other councils that I felt could be reasonably compared to NNC. Currently, with 78 members, each member on average serves 4,923 people. This puts us 11th out of the 17 in terms of population per member, with Buckinghamshire first with 3,700 people per member, and Cornwall coming 17th and last with 6,547 people per elected member. Under these proposals presented to us today, and with the population growth considered, we jump to second on this list with 3,982 people per elected member, behind, once again, only Buckinghamshire. Given it is widely accepted that they are set to see their member numbers cut from the current 147 to somewhere near 100, we are likely to top this list of unitary authorities and have more members per population than any other comparable authority. There is nothing within this report that differentiates us from many of these councils and gives reasonable justification why we ought to have such a glut of elected members. As a Conservative who believes in small government, and as an engineer who has spent a career spanning 20 years encouraging lean processes, cutting waste, and identifying opportunities for efficiencies across multiple industries, I regret to say that I cannot support such a proposal as this, and I shall be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Mercer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I happen to disagree strongly with the speech that was just made. We took a cut from roughly 150 councillors down to 78 when the reorganisation took place. The work hadn't disappeared, still doing the same things, but twice as much work per councillor, basically. The workload, particularly on the executive, is not a full-time job. It's a great deal more than a full-time job. When I stepped down from the executive, it was partly on medical advice. My blood pressure was oscillating up to 180 and down to 130. I was told that you had to do something or else start looking at your will. My blood pressure, having left the executive, is now stable at between 120 and 130. That tells you a heck of a lot. Now, I don't think that you get better services by having fewer councillors look at them. How you come to that conclusion is a mystery to me. I cannot see how it can possibly be the case. If anything, the more eyes that look at a problem, the more chance you've got of solving it properly. I therefore think that 99 is the right figure, and given that we've got massive growth coming in the future, which will incur much more work than having the same number of people there already, because you've got to plan the new services for them, the new highways, the new doctor's services, the new schools, etc. That's all got to be planned. So it's not just a case of running the services, you've got to create them from scratch. So that means it's actually more work when you're growing than when you're there already. Put that all together, and I cannot see any reason for opposing this report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Paul's just going to shut the windows.
Technology. That done? Yeah, okay. Councillor Hakewell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sat on that working party, and the first thing that I realised was that we were not going to get any real voice. We had 5 members, we had 3 Tories, 1 Labour, Councillor McKean, and 1 Jim, independent. At that meeting, I suggested that Councillor Keane should vice-chair that group so that we had the largest party in control, naturally, Conservative, but the second largest party, Labour, vice-chairing it. Imagine what happened, Chairman. I was outvoted. We had a Conservative chair and a Conservative deputy. And this was after we had the briefing from the Boundary Commission, which told us this is not political. So within minutes, of that meeting and working group starting, it was clear it was political in that way. I commend Councillor Griffiths' point about Max Colour, chairman of the Boundary Commission, suggested 45. No one has yet told me why we got to 78, but 2 per county ward would have been 52, which would have been about right. And he was the most knowledgeable person in the country to make that decision. Perhaps we wanted 3 in every ward so that county councillors would immediately be 2 to 1 outvoted in any future unitary. We need to revise the committees. We've got 4 planning committees. If you look at the number of applications come, whilst they are diverse, we could very easily do that with 2 rather than 4. We've got an executive which is overpopulated with members as well. The Green Alliance came to 60 as a reasonable number, and thinking also about 1, 2 and 3 member wards in the next section of this. We should not be spending more on council allowances. We should be spending more on the services that our customers have no but wish or right but to pay their council tax. We also in the Alliance Group felt, particularly with those being new to the council, that a much better central resource to help us direct those councillors with work and jobs in the centre, in democratic services, not simply doing the work they do with minuting, but able, during the day, to work out and help councillors who may find questions coming in. So we felt it would be better not to spend on allowances, but to spend on an internal resource. Councillor Mercer says 150 to 78. Well, we no longer have the Children's Trust or a scrutiny committee on that. The fire service moved from the county council to the police and fire commissioner. And in that sense, we have spent millions over the 30 odd years I've been on the council, encouraging people to do it themselves, self-service. So, Chairman, our suggestion is 60. Our suggestion is to get things sorted and to do it more efficiently. And of course, we have the right to put that directly to the Boundary Commission. You might have guessed I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Smithers, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up a few points. Councillor Griffiths made some comments which cannot go unanswered, I'm afraid. Councillor Griffiths, you spent a lot of time on the LGR change process, and if you recall back, the structural change order required that this authority was to be set up in an executive format, and that's what we've got. However, what we did do is we took it that one step forward with our officers, our fantastic officers that work with us all the time, to bring this hybrid form of governance, which included the EAPs to give us a hybrid model between executive and between committee. So I think that's a win-win. Regarding his comments about officers, I think you're gravely mistaken. None of these officers are browbeaten. They are able to work in their own space and advise us as executive about what would be the best way forward. The executive and the corporate leadership team work hand in hand on a daily basis to deliver for Northamptonshire and our ambitious plans, which are going far beyond this administration's time. And finally, let's not forget, this is a report that's going forward just with our ideas about numbers. It's not what's going to come at the end of it. The Boundary Commission are a professional organisation, which many of you have alluded to before and just a while back. They have years of experience, and they will, and I emphasise on that, they will decide on how many councillors Northamptonshire needs. And it's them that will make that final recommendation, and it's us that will have to live with that final recommendation. So all of the argument about numbers today, I think, is immaterialistic, because ultimately they will look at it, they will take the cases case by case, and if they think it's justified, they will do that. If they do not think it's justified, they will make a ruling, and as I say, we will have to live with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell Roberts, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate with interest, and I agree with the leader about not getting involved in a discussion on numbers. What I do want to do, though, is to say that we in this area have shown that we've got ambition. And in order to deliver on that ambition, a better future for our people, we're going to need a team. And this report helps us a step or two forward on building that team. Somebody else will gauge how many members we're going to have. That's as maybe. But I think we need to come together and get behind our big ambition. The Max Caller thing, the one thing that came over from me from the Max Caller, and I met him too, was the fact that we were not doing the boring very well, and that we were not doing scrutiny very well. And I don't criticise anybody on that. What I would now say is let's build the team that can make sure and ensure that we're doing these jobs really, really well. Get behind the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGee, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the officers and those involved doing that. It's a shame your leader thinks it's a waste of time. Certainly not. They put a lot of hard work in it, and it made all groups think going forward what would happen to this council. Chair, I've got a problem with the suggestion from your group about 99, because I believe that regardless what Councillor Mercer says, being a councillor, we were never meant to be full-time councillors. Never meant to be full-time councillors. That's why we've got some fantastic officers that get paid very well for doing the job. What's happened here, as did in Northamptonshire County Council, is the executive are doing the small stuff. And I'll give you one example, Chair, and this is where they should learn moving forward. A very voluntary group, half a mile from here, wants some murals on a wall to make the area look better. But they're not allowed to do it till the executive sees the pictures. What do we pay officers for? That is micromanaging. That's why you're tired, you're doing long hours, because you're doing the wrong stuff. You should be doing the strategic stuff, making sure we're delivering the right services, not micromanaging. That's why you need more councillors, so you think you do. Do the job right, and you won't.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. Councillor Wendy Brackenbury, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to refer members to page 55, the fourth bullet point down. It refers to scrutiny and potential additional committees in the not too distant future. If you read that, there is a possibility, I believe, that members or anyone else who reads the report to feel that we're not actually scrutinising some of these areas, children's services, health services, educational needs. I can assure members and the public that we are scrutinizing those areas. We have a working plan. We have cross-party task and finish groups. Our first one will be, one of the first large ones will be reporting the scrutiny at its next meeting. We are not West Northants Council, so I agree the numbers of members working, doing the work, won't change whether we have 2 committees or 5 committees, but actually the work is still there, however it is constituted. So I would prefer to see, we strongly recommend we do the same taken out, but you know, I didn't write the report. And also I would like to remind Councillor Hakewell, he sits on both the Scrutiny Commission and the Finance and Resources Committee, and we have the Children's Trust. We scrutinise the Children's Trust, and it does form part of our work plan. It sits on our work plan. Thank you.
Councillors, we've now had 10 speakers, but I don't see any more arms going up in the air. Councillor Gilmer.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a lot of what I was going to say, some of the other members have said already, so I won't repeat it. But an enormous amount of work went into this document. Councillor Hakewell was present at those meetings and didn't actually say he disagreed with it, so I'm rather puzzled at why he takes issue with it now. One thing as Councillor Lorman has said, we took into account First of all, the committees we've got at the moment and the capacity we've got, and then we took into the growth, and that's where we came to the numbers. But we also took into account what would happen if we kept the same, if we decreased, and if we increased, and it's all in the report. We laid it out like that because the officers said that's what the Boundary Commission would like to see, a well-reasoned document. And one of the main things that we found was if you increase the workload, you were going to have difficulty getting young councillors to come in. As Councillor McGee said, it's not meant to be a full-time council, so you need to spread the load. But I would like to take issue with one thing that Councillor Hakewell did say. If he would like to look at the Thrapston Area Committee, we have to have one extra meeting next week to hold, and we've had 2 meetings, or one to come, where we've had to start at 5:30 in order to get through the business. So saying that we don't have enough business for 4 committees is just wrong.
Thank you, councillors. I don't see any more hands going up. Saying that, can we now move to the vote? Oh, sorry, councillor. That's number 3. Maybe you'd like to sum up, would you please?
Thank you, Chairman. I listened intently, nothing much new. I fully expected certain councillor to make interesting comments like Cloud Cuckooland. I think madness was described before in a text message and so on. So it's quite interesting what comes out. What we are is, as the leader said, a very forward-looking council. We need those numbers to do the business. And I'm sorry if Councillor Wendy Brackenbury felt it was a slight on scrutiny. It certainly wasn't, because all we did was what would happen if we stay 78, if we don't, and go and beyond. So that is the only reason. It's there as a sort of guide, what could happen, and certainly the children's services, that is a possibility, that it will come back in 3 years' time, and that will keep us very, very busy indeed. It is sad that, because Matt Keane said in the meetings with us, he would support 88. I understand from what he said, 88 plus 13%, 78 plus 18%, 13% comes to 88. So I had hoped that it was a unanimous decision. We were not under much illusion that it wouldn't be. So it is up to each individual councillor if they wish to make their own submission as well, or as a political group. Simple exercise. If you have more officers employed to do a councillor's job, you will pay a lot more than you would if you have some councillors on a low allowance. That is a fact. And that was our being mindful about that as well. But I have no issue with the report whatsoever, and I commend it to Council, and I move the recommendation now, Chairman.
Thank you, councillor. Can we now move to the vote, please? All those in favour, please show. Sorry? Those against? Abstentions? That is carried, councillors. We've been going about an hour now, and I'm mindful of the fact that the next item is going to be quite lengthy. I hope not too long, so I'm going to call a 5-minute break if you want.
Mr. Chairman, before you do, could I have my vote against on that last item recorded in the minutes, please?
I'll have to take legal advice on that, councillor. Is that okay? Yeah. Yes, that's okay, councillor, thank you. And Councillor Hakewell. Thank you. Right, there'll be a short break. Grab a quick cuppa and back. And don't forget the circus. Agenda item 10, councillors, the review of members' allowances 2022. Please may I see the interim Democratic Services Manager to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. The first item will be to give the apologies. Oh, excuse me, Chair. Sorry, a councillor's got their hands raised.
So it's all right, they're just indicating to me they want to speak. Sorry, carry on.
That's very keen. The first item, councillors, is to give the apologies of Professor Leach, the chair of the panel, who unfortunately doesn't drive long distances and lives, I believe, somewhere up in Cumbria. So unfortunately, he had been planning to come down by train today, but unfortunately, he's not able to. So his apologies. I did invite him if he wished to add anything in writing to his report. I was happy to read that out, but he said he was happy to stand by any comments made by the panel in the report. So you have before you for consideration the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. I won't go through the report in detail. I'm sure members have had the opportunity to read it, and it has been in the public domain for a few weeks because it did go for noting to the Democracy and Standards Committee a few weeks ago. So members are being asked, obviously the recommendation is written to accept the suggestions from the Independent Remuneration Panel, and Council is obviously required to take note of the recommendations made. But without going into any further detail, I'd like to, through the chair, hand over to the chair of the Democracy and Standards Committee, Councillor Laura Lorman, who will, I believe, formally move the report. Thank you.
Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got the feeling I've drawn the short straws today with very controversial reports. There isn't an awful lot I can add to the Independent Remuneration Panel, except that in February 2021, the Shadow Authority adopted the Independent Remuneration Panel, and it was agreed at that time for it to be reviewed after 12 months. And that's exactly what the Independent Remuneration Panel has done. My understanding from the discussions at the Democracy and Standards Committee that possibly some minor changes, tweaks and so on had to be made because perhaps not all the information was in accordance with the right understanding at times. But then we can make tweaks to anything, really. I'm disappointed that not at least one of the three people who were on the Independent Remuneration Panel are here. Because it would have been good practice to be able to ask them, and that was actually what we asked in the Democracy and Standards Committee, for the Democratic Services Manager to please approach, and then any comments were supposed to be sent over to them. Unfortunately, I haven't received a response to that. So I presume they decided not to respond at all. But you don't need to answer, Mr. Gold. So with regards to the allowances, it is very detailed. Some committee chairs or exec have had discussions with the Independent Remuneration Panel, and so they would fully understand the differences between when we started last year in February and where we are now. So there's a heck of a difference. We have settled in, and we need to ensure that we provide for those councillors who may not be in a very good position, where they have, say for instance, and that's not good, where they have childcare, care for the elderly, for the disabled and so on, which is of course compensated in our remuneration. But those sort of things, it's got to be an attractive package as well, and attractive as much as that younger members. And I've said that earlier when I was talking about the boundary changes. We have to attract younger councillors, and I'm very pleased when I look around that we do have younger councillors amongst us. But sometimes I think, younger than me anyway, sometimes I think they struggle. If they have to take time off, they have perhaps unpaid leave and so on, it is a struggle for them. So without prolonging the agony, this is the report, the recommendation from the Democracy and Standards Committee had to be to let full council discuss it and take the decision, because it wasn't our decision at Democracy and Standards. So over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any councillor wish to second this item? Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second it and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Now, so far I have 4 speakers, John and Zoe McGee, Councillor King-Lowell and Scott Brown. Martin. What's the lady at the back called? Okay, we'll get on with those few, and about 7 o'clock I'll see if there's any more hands that want to go up.
Lynn Buckingham as well.
Oh. Okay, Councillor John McGee, please, you were first.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a shame Professor Leach wasn't here, who I met many years ago on leadership training. A lot of respect for him, Chair, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind that I was out with Councillor Zoe McGee, hand in hand with the strikers at Kettering this morning for a couple of hours. I'm sure he wouldn't have minded that, knowing him. Chair, this paper, I sometimes wonder, given that this is whipped by the administration, that if it's worth saying anything, but of course we've got to, because too, it's important and it's our role. And the reason I wouldn't whip something like this, Chair, my conscience tells me, in this day, in this time, when people are struggling out there, we want to spend a lot of money giving councillors extra. If it was tied in perhaps with staff pay awards, perhaps it might have been a different debate, but it's not. And the majority of the deputy leader of Labour group may get an allowance, may not. Didn't last year. I'm not going to cry over that, did we? We're not going to cry over that. Sure, so this is about conscience. So regardless of you've been whipped or not, look at your conscience and look at your residents out there, people who, especially when it comes to September and October, will be choosing between eating and heating. And that's the reality happening out there. We're going into the deepest recession we've had for many, many a time. And we want to spend that money on ourselves. Not acceptable. Not acceptable, Chair. So think about your conscience and not the whip, and vote against this at this time. Bring it back next year, year after. It's not appropriate now. And I really do hope you look at yourselves and say, let's support our residents and not do this today. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Zoe McGee, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to bring you back to reality, and I'm going to give you a story along the lines of what Councillor McGee has just said, and I'm going to tell you why, in good faith, I cannot support this. So just a short walk from here on this ward is a young man who confided in a youth worker not that long ago that he has to join them. I have to join them. That were his words. I have to join them. And she said, of course you don't. There's always a choice. You'd never have to put yourself in that position. You would never have to do that. And he said to her, well, actually I do, because I've got a house. In that house is my mum and my sister. And in our fridge, there's only a block of cheese. That's all we ever seem to have in our fridge, one single block of cheese. And he said to his youth worker, at the age of 16, I have to feed my family. I have to feed my mum. I have to feed my sister. That's what I have to do. This young man, 6 months later, was found in a field not too far from here with nearly his whole right arm missing. He had been a victim of knife crime. His arm was nearly hanging off. He was helicoptered to a hospital because he felt he did not have a choice, because he had to feed his family. That is the reality of what is happening just outside here. And that is why, in good conscience, I cannot support this. And I urge you all, when you hold up your orange cards, to think of that young man. And I urge you all to think that this isn't just a Kingswood issue. This isn't just a Corby issue. Issues like that are happening all over this county. And I really, really think that these are the people that we should be supporting and we should be backing and we should be thinking of in these times, and not ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor King-Lewell, please.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Chair. I've thought long and hard on this issue and considered whether I can support this item after our group meeting. And I thought to myself that I've not come into politics. I've come into politics not to be whipped, but to stand for what is right and what is true to me. And on this point of principle, I cannot support this item for this reason. I stand here today to be awarded an increase of 11% or thereabouts for my work as councillor, where millions of people, as John McGee said, are struggling with the cost of living crisis, and other public services are without an increase at all. Think of NHS workers are getting 1%. The timing of this is difficult, and I understand my colleagues completely. I understand my party and why they want this to go through. Some of the reasons they gave was admirable. However, I will be in dereliction of my duty as a representative of the people I stand for and myself if I vote this through. And any increase, I must state, that comes to me, because I'm sure this will go through tonight, as the majority of my party wants it to go through, will be going to a chosen charity of my choosing. And I'm likely to lose the whip, but I may just state that I always usually am a team player. But I must also highlight that I am even more a formidable adversary. I won't be supporting this vote at all. Thank you.
Councillor Scott Brown, please.
Thank you once again, Chair. I must be a glutton for punishment today, because once again, I find myself unable to support these proposals put to us. Fear not, though, Chair, I already know my fate and accept it. And I'm confident that the people of Earls Barton Ward are broadly with me on this one. I understand that we have to attract more people to becoming councillors, and younger people and more diverse people, I do. And I'm sure we'll hear more arguments to that effect. However, it brings me back to when I first got involved in politics as an activist at 15 years old. When I turned 18, I was asked, would you consider standing for council? And subsequently asked again when I was in my 20s and in my 30s. And my answer was always the same. It was never, how much is the allowance? It was always, what time are meetings held? I shall remind those making this argument of attracting more diverse members to council of this later on in the year. It's never about the money. I'd like to make this point though, Chair, if I may. My wife is an NHS nurse. This year she received a 3% pay rise. I have a good friend who is a firefighter. This year she received a pay rise of 1.5%. I have another good friend, and I know it's surprising how many friends I have, but bear with me. He's a policeman, and this year he received a pay rise of 3%. The armed forces are expected to see a 2.9% pay increase. I have one other friend, Mr. Chairman, the Conservative Treasury Minister Simon Clarke, who only this week warned that matching pay to the rate of inflation predicted to spiral to 11% would only make things worse. So discipline was important. When I consider these numbers and look down at the list of recommendations I see, what I can only describe as grotesque figures of 10%, 17%, 13% and 33% increases. Given the current climate, and given that I am a good Conservative who listens to those senior members of government, I urge my colleagues to take heed of the Treasury Minister's advice, show discipline in these difficult times and reject these recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hakewell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And my goodness, those were passionate words from two colleagues there. I know I've been there and I got out. Mr. Chairman, I'm very glad to be outside doing what you do outside the tent. But this is 1 year in to a new council, and all the people I talked to when I spoke about the two items on this agenda, and someone said, and I said, well, I can't fully say that, and then I thought I could, snouts in the trough. They were saying, we are there, we have nothing else but the people who pay the council tax go to court if they don't pay it. In private industry outside, if you don't match your wages and your services, you go out of business. And we should not rely on that particular issue. I don't understand, and there may be a point of personal clarification about childcare allowances and for the elderly. Was it being suggested that this rise is to go in to allow that to happen? Because my understanding is there is no limit on childcare and allowances for the elderly for those who have them. I don't expect a pay rise for that at the moment, other than for when my wife might be looking after me, who knows. Attract younger councillors to meetings, and I think someone else made that point. We set this council up with evening council meetings, and within a few weeks, even those who professed to be very much in favour of evening council meetings were going for daytime. And the reason people don't come is not because the amount of money they would lose in full-time work by coming to a daytime meeting. They don't come because of the arrogance and bombastic nature of the majority most of the time in this chamber. Meeting times are more sensible in the evening from that point of view. And it's exactly the same principle for the last one, where you're asking for more councillors. If we had more efficient and better central resource to help those councillors, as when I was a salesman, we always had a sales office at head office where you could get information backwards and forwards and when you got home at night. It's the same principle with the Boundary Commission numbers. It's the same principle here. Spend that money, A, on our residents and B, on our staff, so that they can help us and we can attract those younger people. Everyone else is cutting their cloth. It seems phenomenal that this is being broadcast out to people outside, and we are talking about 12.5% increase 1 year in. And can I say, Chairman, that's £350,000 we're voting to give ourselves in wages over these next 3 years if this happens. Wait until the Boundary Commission gives its view and then put any further allowances in place after the next election where people can get elected on them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorothy Maxwell, please.
I support these recommendations because this report was done by an independent person. I feel to get to meetings, they cost money. I go to all the meetings that I'm expected to go to, but I don't claim travel. I feel that it's not about the money at all. It's about giving our services to the public out there. And the only way we're going to give our services to the public out there is actually going. So I think that as it stands at the moment, I welcome this report. I don't feel guilty because at the end of the day, we each say what we want to say. So thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jean Addison, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the members that have spoken against this. I can't support this, Chair. There are husband and wife teams within this council that will be taking home more money than families that are working 2 jobs. And I can't support that in this day and age. This report can be deferred until after the next election. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I have a bit of a dilemma because I started to write very quickly when all the hands were going up. MA, and I'm not sure if it's Martin Griffiths or Matt Keane. Matt, did you wish to? Yes, then I've also got you, Councillor. Matt Keane, please.
Yeah, currently our residents are facing a cost of living crisis. We each sit here in this chamber representing residents from left behind areas to leafy suburbs, but everyone is having to adapt to rising prices at the moment. This is the worst possible time for councillors to be looking at increasing allowances. I sit here not because I'm an employee, but because I'm representing residents' views. Now, politicians are not popular people. I disagree with that. Political scandal will get 100 times the coverage in the press than what a political success story would do. Most of us here are public servants, dedicated public servants. I can see many of the people that have already spoken who are absolutely dedicated to their communities. Take politics out of it, we're here to serve our residents. Now, councillors do endure costs. Today, by being here, I'm losing half a day's pay. And driving around Northamptonshire, I'm spending lots of money on fuel. But I would be doing this because of my dedication if the allowances were £100,000 or £100. Now, we need to make sure we do attract a broad spectrum of political candidates, and I do think it's important to have a fair allowance. But this proposal couldn't have been timed worse, and our residents have fed that back to me. I think our current allowances are more than fair, they're very generous. They're nearly double what they were as a borough councillor. So I won't be voting in favour for this recommendation. And I also think today, when we've got Conservative MPs condemning striking action over 7% pay rises, these are increases on people's livelihoods. But we've got Conservative councillors in this chamber that want to vote for up to 14% for their executive members. Maybe the executive members should take up the offer of industrial action, and we'll see if the public are supportive on their side. So I won't be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alison Dalziel, please.
Thank you, Chair. This morning, Northants Telegraph put an article on Twitter talking about this particular debate that was going to happen in the chamber today. And I just wanted to relay some of the comments from general members of the public who have responded to that article on Twitter. And this is what they've said. Unbelievable, beyond belief, beyond disgraceful, kick in the teeth to staff of this council. The audacity of this vote is insulting. Now, they are people across Northamptonshire who have simply seen an article on Twitter and looking at what we are voting for today. The timing of this debate and this bringing this report is completely unacceptable, bearing in mind what is happening out there with cost of living crisis and everything else which is going on with fuel increases and petrol increases. Now, I sit on an area planning committee and a strategic planning committee, and within the past year, those committees have been cancelled on a number of occasions. In fact, the Area Planning Committee probably has run possibly 50 to 60% of the time, with the others being cancelled through lack of business. So it is unbelievable that we are then thinking of increasing the allowance for somebody on the Area Planning Committee by 33%. That just does not make any sense whatsoever. Now, sadly, I'm going to have to leave soon because I have to get back to work because I'm a working councillor, so I may not be here for this vote, but I just want it put on record. I'm voting against this today, and obviously, you know, I just want that on record. I know it's not, I won't be here for the actual debate, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Backenby, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And, you know, I've certainly heard a lot of the comments that have been made, but the simple point I'd like to make is that I remember having this discussion when we were in the shadow period, when the then independent review of allowances was put forward at that point, and there was a lot of dispute and discussion about that. We have spent a lot of public money on commissioning this independent report. Is it perfect? I don't think it is. I think there are areas in it which might have been thought of differently. But we have spent money on getting this report to us. It is an independent report. It isn't. We did not do this ourselves. It was done by an independent body, and we have the choice of accepting the report that we have commissioned, or of basically doing nothing at all. I mean, that is the choice we've got, and having gone to the effort of putting up an independent report, I think we should listen to its findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lynn Buckingham, please.
Thank you very much, and I welcome all the people that have gone on before, made some absolutely brilliant points, and I'm not going to duplicate that, just to say that I cannot support this because of what is going on in our communities, and as a councillor I need to support my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Mercer, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I must say I'm very disappointed by this debate. It should have been apolitical, it should have been rational, it's been party political. There's been repeated criticism of Conservatives who didn't write the report. We were simply the people who followed the instructions from the shadow to commission a review of it. And yet we're the ones having mud thrown at us. I'm very disappointed. I was expecting a more grown-up debate. As for the comments about the Corby Area Planning Committee not having to meet and therefore not deserving the money, well, transfer it to the Thrapston one, which has to have extra meetings. Oh, so no, you wouldn't do that though, would you? No, that's not, that would be unequal, of course. Right, as regards evening and daytime meetings, when I was interviewing people to stand for this election, every single time I hammered on the table, there are going to be daytime meetings, whether you like it or not. If you can't cope with daytime meetings, you're going to have to accept that they're going through. Because we cannot keep asking officers. We cannot keep asking officers to turn up in the evenings and stay there till 11 o'clock at night to have evening meetings. The officers work during the day. We have got to work with them. Right, now, finally, when the original allowances were being proposed, we did not think they were right. We compared them with the West and said, there's a massive discrepancy here, factor of 3 difference in some cases. They can't both be right. And we were promised, oh, okay, we'll sort it out next time. Now we're being told you can't sort it out next time. That's one final point I'll make. This isn't a 10 or 11% increase. If you read the report, it's a 1.75% increase with anomalies being removed. But of course, you perhaps haven't read the report. I have. I'm quite disappointed.
Councillor, will you please look at me when you're speaking and address your comments through the chair, not turning around like when we were down in the theatre and addressing those up in the public gallery, please.
Mr. Chairman, I apologise.
Have you finished? Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Councillor Martin Griffiths. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and Councillor Andy Mercer needs to calm down a little bit for his own health and well-being. Now, I'm not going to say an awful lot on this, but I do agree with Councillor Hakewell that this should be in parallel with what we were talking about half an hour ago. That's the right time for this discussion on allowances to take place. What I'm going to do is quote 2 members here today on their views on members' allowances 2 years ago. We all stood as councillors to represent our constituencies. That is what we stood for. If you stood for earning extra money, then you are in the wrong job. We don't do it for allowances. That was Councillor Jonathan Eakins, Chairman of the Licensing Committee, who, if this goes through, will receive a hefty increase. The second quote was, with everything that is going on, it is wrong and immoral to think of raising allowances. That was Councillor Clive Hallam, former chairman of Wellingborough Planning Committee, honourable member for North Norfolk. So we have two Conservatives there who will clearly be voting against, and I applaud, Mr. Chairman, I applaud Councillor Lowell and Brown for their stance, and that is representing the people that put them in their seats and listening to them as opposed to taking the party whip. And I think all Conservative members should do likewise here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John Eakins, please.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, if I may, I run a town centre business, and I can tell you, as my chair of licensing role, is I have many of a conversation over the last 6 and 12 months with many taxi drivers that come in to see me to discuss taxi licensing issues. I do that in my time. I also do that as a councillor. And I go back to making a promise, Chair, that I made to my constituents and my electors back in 2015, where I only made one promise, and that was to promise to serve and do my best on behalf of my electorate. It's interesting, Mr. Chair, is that we have a couple of pseudo gamekeepers. I wouldn't say poachers turn gamekeepers, because that would be disparaging for poachers. Councillor Griffiths made a remark that I said, we don't do it for the money, we do it to serve our constituents. That's true, I haven't changed that. What Councillor Griffiths seems to forget to add was that the reason why I made that comment, Chair, was because Councillor Griffiths, with his 2IC, proposed himself a pay rise as leader of the now defunct Sovereign Wellingborough Town Council, Borough Council. People were against that. However, it was made a comment that this was Councillor Griffiths' only job. Only job. His only form of income. We don't do it for the money. We're elected. And that was the comment I made, Chair, was we don't do it for the money, we do it to serve our residents. So I'd just like to remind, through you, Chair, that Councillor Griffiths seemed to forget that he proposed an independent review on his own chair or leadership increase in funds, or should we say salary, because he said it was his only job. So I'm a little bit shocked. No, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked anything comes out of Mr. Griffiths' mouth anymore. The years that I put up with him and his, dare I say, his attitude to people,
Stop, please.
Again, it's evident today by turning around and saying, accusing other people of doing it for the money, where he's only here, in his own admission, doing the same thing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's 14 speakers. Is there anybody else, please? Councillor? Councillor Ken Hampton. And Lee Wilkes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I stand, even though I'm in great pain. I fell off a ladder on Monday and couldn't walk for 2 days, but I'm here. But I would, I'm here specifically to say that I find it very difficult to vote for this. I know what was said a year ago, but if you take it back to a year ago, the people were not suffering hardship the way they are now, with the energy prices, which have doubled, trebled, etc., etc. And we've got the Ukraine thing going on, so food is now more expensive. We've got food banks that are being used a great deal more than they were before. I have been an elected councillor for 30 years. My residents that I represent are more than just residents, they're actually my friends. And I cannot look them in the eye and accept what appears to be, and I understand what Councillor Mercer was trying to get at earlier on, but in reality, it is effectively 11% increase. I cannot accept that when I complain about the railway workers not accepting 3%. I cannot then accept 10%, 11%, and still look people in the eye. That is not right. And I'm not one, and I represent the people that elected me, and that matters to me, and that's where my first loyalty lay. So I'm afraid I cannot vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Councillor Lee Wilkes, please.
Thank you, Chair. As has been said multiple times this afternoon, of course, the timing of this isn't great. And it's a real shame that there aren't members of the IRP here tonight. I think everybody would accept they were always going to revisit what they have seen to be an incorrect calculation last year. It would have been great if they could have turned up this afternoon, like we all have, and explained actually why they made that mistake in the first place. They were always going to revisit it because they didn't get it right, obviously, last year. That's why they are making a recommendation. Now, Chair, it's the easiest thing in the world. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room actually would like to take the easy option and just say, no, we're not going to vote for this. We accept that they made a mistake. They accept that they made a mistake. They've corrected it. But vote against it. But we aren't necessarily here just to do the things that we find personally easier for us when we go home. Now, there's a lot of passionate people in this room, and we all do this as a vocation. We do it to improve the lives and help the residents of our area. And Chair, I would not do this for the hours that I have to put in and the recompense that comes back for any other organisation in the world. I wouldn't do it in my business life. The hours that are put in for the compensation that comes back just doesn't stand right. It wouldn't be legal, in fact, in the corporate world. But of course, we all do it here because we want to increase what we can give to our communities. And we do need to attract and retain a broad range of councillors, and we do need younger councillors. And I am aware that some councillors can't turn up to these meetings because they are losing money from their jobs. It's a shame that some aren't here today. I mean, we heard from Councillor Hakewell, we've got nobody of the youngest members of our council from the Greens. There are none here. So we do need to attract, if the interruption's finished, and we do need to attract, of course, and retain those people. But working, we heard earlier that some councillors, most councillors maybe, outside of the executive, can be working 40 hours a week. Now, we do that because there is a requirement from us to work those hours from the residents. None of us want to be at the stage where a resident rings and says, can you help? And we say, no, actually, we can't. No, I've got to go to work. Or I haven't got the time to give up, or I've given enough time this month. None of us want to be there. And when you're working 40 hours a week, there is no doubt that some councillors don't have the ability or the options or the choices to have other income streams. Now, we've heard from some councillors today who clearly don't need the money. Fantastic. I'm pleased for them, and I'm sure they can donate that. We've already heard that one will. They can donate that to a charity. But I'm not prepared to take the easy option and throw those people under the bus, Chair. So I accepted a long time ago, I'm wrapping up now, Chair, thank you very much. I accepted a long time ago that our remuneration would be decided by an independent panel. I accepted it last year. Why would I not accept it this year? And I'll be voting for this, Chair.
Nearly got a red card there, Lee. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to put on record my dismay at the personal point scoring and grudge settling that has gone on in the chamber today. I don't think it's appropriate, and I hope we don't hear it again in full council meetings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mark Pengelly, please.
Yes, Chair. I think we all recognise how hard we're all working. This is a different animal from Colby Borough Council when I was on £4,000 a year and when I was deputy leader was on £9,000 a year. I was working hard then, but I'm exhausted. You get adult social care cases sometimes take 5 or 6 hours of your time. And I do recognise, because we're an executive, I don't think the executive is the best model. I do recognise how hard the executive members are working. I've been trying to get Helen Harris, but she's so busy, I can't get hold of her. It's really difficult. I understand that. Helen Howe, sorry. But, Chair, it's the timing of what we're doing. It's wrong, and it's how the public will see it. Us giving ourselves a pay rise right now, when we've got people on strike, we've got these left-wing barristers, left-wing militant barristers on about taking industrial action because they can't get the 7%. We've got, I'd love it if Mick Lynch was here today, because he tears us apart. The people's favourite now, isn't he? The most popular person in England. We're doing it wrong. We've got staff sitting in this room, they're going to get 2% pay rise. It's wrong to do it now. We can defer this for a year and look at it again. We don't have to do it again. I recognise, and I've always done, and we do, the independent panels. They do a good job. And we talked about the West, and we were going to get in line with the West. Maybe the West was wrong, and they should have brought it down. Have you thought of that? So today it's very difficult. We've got to support our staff. If our staff seeing us getting this rise, they'll think this just isn't right. And I'm on about staff who are doing the bins, who are in the care homes, everywhere else, and also the staff around here today. We've got to be fair. We've got to be seen to be fair. And today I urge all councillors from all political parties not to vote for this. I don't think we should get personal on this. It's about what's right and what's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Matt Finlay, please.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, this has been a very heated and passionate debate, but it was always going to be. Just a few points that I'd like to make, Chair. I mean, to start with, as a couple of the members have kindly pointed out, this is an independent remuneration panel. It is not the council that's saying about this. It's an independent panel. Councillor Andy Mercer went on and did explain about that. So I suppose the question to councillors who, of course, are speaking out and saying that we won't support this is when will they choose to actually listen to the independent remuneration panel? If they'd have put forward to the council that we would have a reduction in our allowance, would they support that, or would they choose to ignore that, and how would the public perceive it? I think we have to be very, very careful if we have an independent panel as to when we choose to ignore and listen to what they say. Otherwise, if we do choose to ignore what they're saying, we might as well not have them, because it's pointless and it's then self-defeating. And I think, whilst I fully understand what people are saying about public perception, of course it's always going to be that way. I think if we were absolutely flush with cash, I think the public would still say exactly the same thing. It's always a controversial matter. And I know what people are talking about, and Councillor Brown talking about all of his friends that he has and what pay they're getting. I'd just say another bit. In my normal daytime job, I work in logistics, and another pay rise has gone through between 7 and 8% in warehousing. That is the third pay rise in a 12-month period. So there are people out there who are getting pay rises and looking at the cost of living, and that's warehouse operative level. I know it's been mentioned about the West, and again, Councillor Brown and his friends, but what he doesn't mention is about his mentor, the leader of West Northants Council, and the pay that they're on. That one was kept out. But of course, I know what members are saying in the fact that that might be wrong. But unfortunately, that's not what the independent remuneration panel have just said. That's not what the council are saying, because we're not saying what goes in the report. That is the panel. So, Chair, I have to say, whilst I fully understand it's a controversial matter, and of course, I have to say that I'm not doing this job for the money. I'm doing it for the love of the job. As a result, I will be supporting this because I have to, as hard as a pill as it might be to swallow, I have to support what the independent panel are saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jill Mercer, did you wish to reserve the right to come back? I think you said so.
I think things that I would have said have been said, Chairman, so I'll deny that.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, that's 19. Are there any more, please?
Chair, we'd like a recorded vote on this.
Could you stand up if you're going to say that, please? That's fine. Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Laura Lorman. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. There isn't an awful lot I can add or want to add, except Councillor Harrison said as well, there's been an awful lot of personal attacks and cheap point scoring, and that really has got to stop in this council. Whether husband and wife are members of this council is neither here nor there. I gave up last year. I voluntarily gave up my job to continue as a councillor because I couldn't cope with the workload as a unitary councillor as well as a town councillor, and at that time I was mayor as well. It is not to say that I'm supporting my income with that, but it is wholly justified. And I thought it was very cheap point scoring. Councillor Eakins made a very, very good point, and I fully endorse that. You reminded me of what happened at the time. Thank you very much for reminding us that somebody took an allowance and then a few weeks later resigned. It is an independent report. It is not set by the council. It's not set by the Democracy and Standards Committee. We've made it very clear that we will not take the decision. And if you turn to page 95, 211 and 12, you will see the panel sees no reason to depart from their methodology it deployed in its first report. It's prepared with minor adjustments to its earlier recommendations, which reflect what it learned from its interviews. And that, I think, is the proof in the pudding. They understood what we are doing, Chairman, and some others don't seem to. If you work, as I demonstrated earlier on in the councillor survey, at an average of 42 plus hours a week, that is an awful lot. And you work that out over a normal allowance. That is below the living wage. So without any further ado, the 1.57% are actually linked to the staff increases anyway. And I presume then councillors would feel that perhaps staff shouldn't get the 1.75% either. But I think we differ with that. So without any further ado, I move the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. From my point of view, I will not be voting in this except if I have a casting vote. But it won't come to that, will it? I hope. Now, please, we could do with the recorded vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll read out the names. Please indicate for, against or abstain. Apologies if I call out anybody who isn't here. They won't know. Councillor Addison.
I'm voting with my conscience and integrity against.
Can I ask councillors just yes or no? The time for speeches has passed. Councillor Anslow.
Against.
Councillor Armour. Councillor Binley.
For.
Councillor Bone.
For.
Councillor David Brackenbury.
For.
Councillor Wendy Brackenbury.
For.
Councillor Scott Brown.
Against.
Councillor Lynn Buckingham.
Against.
Councillor Bundy.
For.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Currell.
For.
Councillor Dio has now left. Councillor Deering.
For.
Councillor Eakins. Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Hakewell.
Against.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Harrington.
I will abstain.
Councillor Helen Harrison. Councillor Kirk Harrison? For. Councillor Henson is abstaining on this first vote. Councillor Howell? For. Councillor Howes? For. Councillor Irwin? For. Councillor Jackson? For. Councillor Barbara Jenny? For. Councillor Keane? Against. Councillor Lawal? Against. Councillor Graham Lawman? For. Councillor Lawman? For. Councillor Lee? Against. Councillor Marks? For. Councillor Maxwell? For. Councillor McEwen? Against. Councillor John McGee? Against. Councillor Zoe McGee? Against. Councillor Andy Mercer? For. Councillor Jill Mercer? For. Councillor Pandy? For. Councillor Pengelly? Against. Councillor Pentland? For. Councillor Powell? For. Councillor Roberts? For. Councillor Rowley? For. Councillor Shacklock? For. Councillor Smithers? For. Councillor Smith-Haynes? For. Councillor Tebbett? For. Councillor Tighe? For. Councillor Ward? For. Councillor Waters? For. Councillor Wetherall? For. Councillor Wilkes? For. I don't think I've missed anybody. That's, what is it, 37, 14, 2. Chair, the figures are 37 for, 14 against and 2 abstentions, Chair.
That is carried, councillors. Thank you. Want a break? Yeah. Right, a 5-minute break and a 5-minute break only, please, for those that must. Come on then. It's the coffee.
Councillor, please. Thank you.
Agenda item 17, motion on notice. Thank you, councillors. We received 2 motions on notice as printed on your agenda papers. Please note that I expect all contributions to be concise. Please respect the time limits that apply. A mover of a motion is up to 5 minutes maximum. All other contributions are 3 minutes maximum. Thank you. Motion number 1. Please may I see Councillor Hakewell to move the motion.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very simple motion, unusual for me. I'm asking this council to support the portfolio holder in withdrawing this rushed, poorly thought out and executed bid, and to put the policy making where it belongs, along with all other aspects of provision for our gypsies and travellers. It is morally and procedurally wrong to publish a plan with timescales, take it to full council, agree it unanimously on the 31st of March, and then completely U-turn and pull this out of the hat within a week or 2. This goes to the very heart of what we're here to do, to give a clear and unequivocal lead to our communities as to what they can expect to be consulted on and when. We are failing to give that feeling of confidence. There have been no changes in circumstance since the 31st of March, which can in any way justify this development being rushed through, albeit after months of behind closed doors discussion. Our constitution does not provide for a single member decisions unless a full, without fear or favour, report has been prepared, published and debated and taken to a committee. Only after that very public process can minor details be delegated to a portfolio holder and senior officer. If I may quote, in local government there is no substitute for doing the boring really well. Only when you have a solid foundation can you innovate. Max Culler, reporting on the County Council. The solid foundation for deciding appropriate accommodation and locations for our gypsy and traveller communities is the plan and timetable agreed in March. Many people will be bemused and shocked that a council trusted with spending £300 million of their council tax could change course just a month or 2 after having set its budget to commit funding to a project that has borne no scrutiny. Over the last few days, I've been hearing that those in support of this are saying, oh, well, it probably won't be used. In other parts of the country where you get one of these sites, it's not used because the travellers move on. A very expensive piece of development to not be used. Why was 12k spent on a feasibility study in 2016 and the site not brought forward at that time, the same site? I suggest it wasn't feasible then, it isn't feasible now. No one in this room sees a business case detailing the capital and revenue costs of this project and any value for money calculations that identify it is in any sense viable. No provision was made in our budget for this year and therefore no scrutiny on it in January. This is being funding led when it should be planning led, and it's most likely going to end in disaster, both for the council and worse, for the community. The approved plan, which is due to start this month, should proceed, and whatever locations come through then can be funded. I did make the point at our meeting with the portfolio holder that there's a ready-made, planning permission approved, 12-pitch permanent site in Desborough, and that they should switch this funding bid to that, which we currently don't have funded. But of course, no one listened. Mr. Blissett, in his speech and his letter, which has been tabled, makes all the points, and there are hundreds of people who feel the same way as he does. This proposal doesn't do justice to the needs of either the travelling or settled community. As someone pointed out, it feels like travellers can go there, surrounded by roads and the constant traffic from the A14. It doesn't matter about the environment they and their families have to put up with. We would do this in no other circumstances. And I can also say that at the time at which the A14 was built, people got compensation for living that close to it. And here we are proactively asking the traveller community to put up with it. It's a lovely wild area that can benefit the residents of Rothwell to walk in or pass by for generations to come. Many people would like, with the guidance of the Wildlife Trust, to improve the biodiversity of this land and the enjoyment it can bring to the thousands of people who are already in Rothwell and to those thousands who are going to be coming. So, really, really simple. Put it back on track, vote for this motion, put it into the policy process, and move on from there. And Chairman, I shall ask for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Please may I see Councillor Martin Griffiths to second the motion, please.
Happy to second the motion, Chair, and reserve the right to speak. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anybody like to speak to this motion? Councillor Howes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. North Northamptonshire Council recognises the strategic need to make provision for temporary stopping places to serve the area, as demonstrated by the 2019 Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment. So, Council, what this is effectively about is, I'm sure you all have experience of when the travelling community come through Northamptonshire, particularly North Northamptonshire, and they typically stop on our highways, our parks, our car parks, etc. And we've all possibly experienced the angst that that causes the settled community. This is not a proper solution for the Gypsy and Traveller community, and this stopping site is effectively a mechanism to give them a greater provision in terms of their ability to stay for 28 days at a maximum on a particular site. It gives them waste collection, portaloo collection, and other refuse collections as well. So it's the express wish of this executive and administration that we unburden ourselves from decades of angst and problems that not all, but some of the travelling community provide when they come into our area with no proper place to stay. It was conceived as an idea months ago, almost very early on in the administration when we were all duly elected. So this is not rushed in any way, shape or form. It's been on the agenda and been almost weekly discussed at executive catch-up. Back in March of this year, the government announced that they were going to release a fund of £10 million, and any local authority could bid up to £1 million of that. And we decided that because this was part of our agenda that we wanted to take advantage of that bid. And we have worked tirelessly, particularly led by our Executive Director, Mr. Candler, tirelessly into the early hours of the evening on a bid that's well thought out, well costed. So there is a business plan, there is some costings to understand how this will operate, and the government clearly want a demonstrable provision. They are not simply going to accept we want some money with no detail. I understand completely, Mr. Chairman, that the local population have been upset. In terms of the conversation with the local population, we have not engaged with them in terms of a consultation. That will come later. We have engaged with stakeholders, and those stakeholders have been have had an opportunity to make representation. But, Mr. Chairman, this is not a case of a referendum. This is not a choice of do you want it or do you not. This was an exercise in terms of that engagement to seek views. And the bid has now been submitted, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm not prepared. I'll just wrap up for you now. I'm not prepared to throw those countless hours away, and we are working towards our new GTAA, and we've set that in motion, but this bid is for the provision of a stopping site, and I commend the Council to vote this motion down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Nobody else wishes to speak. So, Councillor Griffiths, there you reserve the right before I come back to Councillor Hakewell.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I visited the site yesterday. I wonder how many other members have took the trouble to take a look at what is a very attractive little oasis in the middle of a very, very busy junction. The travellers will be surrounded by heavy goods vehicles. Their children will be breathing in noxious fumes. Are we going to issue them with masks for the duration of their stay? As Councillor Haycall said, due process must be followed, not fast-tracked. Now, the portfolio holder said at a recent NALC meeting at Thrapston that nothing would be forced on parish councils and parishes that they did not want. Well, what about Harrington? Not you, Ken. I want about the village of Harrington. Are they going to be listened to? This isn't about NIMBY. I live quite a way away, but I do know the site exceedingly well. But above all, this needs to be done in conjunction with rigorous enforcement. Without rigorous enforcement, we are wasting our time. And we know that we have a problem. Our previous councils had a problem with enforcement. So it remains a problem at Northamptonshire Council, and I think until such time as we upgrade our enforcement, not just on travellers, but on other things, building control, etc., that now is not the right time to put this through. And we've got the time to follow due process. And that's why I've seconded this motion. Thank you very much.
Councillor Haycall, would you like... Councillor Laura Lorman first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm intrigued. I fully support this superb place. It is a place where our travellers can find refuge for a number of days. As various councillors, or hopefully all councillors know, there are a lot of travellers who are living for short periods beside the road, so to speak, have to be moved on, which costs us money as well, leave behind a lot of rubbish. That site will have all the opportunities, safe opportunities for travellers to move there for 28 days before they are moving on. And the rest of them, as I understand it, are being moved on anyway. The life is, and this comes from my voluntary role as NNC in Health Inequality Champion. I was shocked when public health, the new public health director, actually shared with the two champions the life expectancy of travellers, 52 years as at an average. That is quite shocking. I'd rather have the travellers on a permanent site if they decide to come through our county, our area, and have them there safely for 28 days and then move on to the next place with all the facilities. So I can't support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor. So, Anne-Lee. Councillor Lee.
I haven't gone to see the site, but I haven't heard a reply from Councillor House to the question as to why the site in Desborough, that's already ready with planning permission and that's kitted out, why that one is not being used. So I wonder whether Councillor House could reply to that. Thank you.
Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like some clarification around just how much consultation has gone on, not just with the settled community, but with the travelling community as well. Travellers do deserve to have a good sites to stay on. I can't see that this one will be when it's so close to the A14. Thank you.
Councillor Bundy, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's a fundamental difference between an illegal and an unauthorised encampment, and that point I think is being missed. We need the 14 sites at Desborough for our GTAA to combat unauthorised sites. We need the stopping site to combat illegal encampments and illegal stopping. So that's a fundamental difference. There's two different points being discussed here.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anything, on the points of clarification, are there anything you wish to say, Councillor Howes? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I did remiss about the point about the 10 pitch site. It's not 12, it's 10 at Desborough. That site, I'm afraid, didn't meet the timing, and it's also, there's another piece of work that Councillor Bundy's alluded to that's going on with that particular piece of property, and it's also not ours, Mr. Chairman. So we weren't able to include that in the provisions of the sites that we looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hakewell, please.
Well, there's a debate, Chairman, that everyone has completely missed the point. It's not about whether that is a good site. It's about doing due process in this council properly. It's about being told and telling the community one thing one day and changing that around on another day. Entirely wrong. Completely missed the point. Councillor Lawman, talking about life expectancy, clearly, if she wanted to do that, she would have been talking to Councillor Howes about getting that pitch. Hi, Councillor Smithers, thanks for watching me. She would have been talking about that 10 pitch in Desborough to be a permanent site. Councillor Bundy, the GTAA is a document, it's a background document, it's not a policy, and we have just about to spend a lot of money with a company to update that GTAA. So life expectancy won't be improved by a permanent site on this beautiful site of greenery near Rothwell. As far as consultation is concerned, Councillor Lee, we were told on the 18th of May, the consultation said we intend to do this, and as far as I know, there were dozens of replies, but I have been barred from talking anything about this bid, which would have made this debate a lot more practical from that point of view. So it's all about this administration nosediving away from due process and doing the job properly. I think you are failing yourselves, you are failing the people of Rothwell, and most of all, you're failing the traveller community. Just before I came into this meeting, a member of the traveller community talking to me on social media, this proposal will be a total waste of money because we don't have enough permanent pitches for the local travellers people commenting and saying there's many illegal places. Why haven't the council evicted the illegal and then we do go on to a proper site? So from that point of view, vote for this, put it on the right track, or just nosedive under the leadership of Councillor Smithers smiling at me there, nice to see you. This council will nosedive because if it doesn't get process right, it gets nothing right.
System, we just press a button and it'll all be done.
Yippee doo. Right. Okay. Until then, I'll call the councillors' names out. Please indicate if you're in support of the motion, for or against or abstain. Councillor Addison.
Support.
Councillor Anslow.
For.
Councillor Armour. For. Councillor Binley.
Against.
Councillor Bone. Against. Councillor David Brackenbury.
Against.
Councillor Wendy Brackenbury. Against. Councillor Scott Brown. Against. Apologies. Councillor Lynn Buckingham. Councillor Lynn.
Oh, sorry.
Don't
Forgot where
apologise
I
for
was.
voting for, Councillor. Councillor Bundy. Councillor Carter. Councillor Currell. Councillor Deering. Councillor Eakins. Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Hakewell. Councillor Hallam. Councillor Harrington. Councillor Helen Harrison. Councillor Henson.
Not voting.
Yeah. Councillor Howell. Councillor Howes. Councillor Irwin. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Barbara Jenny. Councillor Keane. Councillor Lawal. Councillor Graham Lawman. Councillor Laura Lawman. Councillor Lee. Councillor Marks.
Against.
Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Peter McEwen. For. Councillor John McGee. Councillor Zoe McGee. Councillor Andy Mercer. Councillor Jill Mercer. Councillor Pentland. Councillor Powell. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Rowley. Councillor Shacklock. Councillor Smithers. Councillor Smith-Haynes. Councillor Tebbett. Councillor Tye. Councillor Ward. Councillor Waters. Councillor Watt. Councillor Wetherall. Councillor Wilkes. Have I missed anybody? No. So, Chair, that's 11 for the motion, 39 against the motion, and 1 abstention.
So that is lost. Thank you. Now move on to... Do we have to?
Oh.
We nearly there.
Okay, yeah. So we get done in 24 minutes.
We'll do it. Councillors, we're going to extend, we have 24 minutes to finish this motion unless we extend. So I propose we extend it by up to 30 minutes, but I'm sure you don't want that long, do you? Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Eakins, Councillor Harrison, thank you. And the vote on that, please. All those for? All those against? Come on, there's got to be somebody somewhere. No? Any abstentions? No? You have the motion number 2 in front of you, councillors. Please may I see Councillor John McGee to move the motion, please.
Thank you, Chair. And just before my colleagues go, I recognise that not all HMO and people that run them are bad. There are some very excellent HMOs out there. And I just want people to recognise that and know that. But, Chair, it's not about how bad or good they're running this motion. It's about how many we have. Chair, I have spoke to officers on this before, and I recognise that George and others are working hard on this, trying to get something done. And you can only get a Section 4 direction in smaller areas. So we have got to gather that evidence together, concentrate on it where we have the biggest problems or the most MHOs in one area, and then start there and then move around other areas where there is a lot together. Because I recognise people need places like that. We all recognise that. We don't have enough housing ever since Thatcher told us we couldn't build council houses, but I'm not going down that road, Chair, because I do want your support on this. Because what we should recognise, Chair, is that a street just round the corner from here, because this is most of all that side is the area that myself, Councillor Soy McGee and Councillor McEwen stand for. And we know it very, very well. There's 7 HMOs in a little street round the corner there. Can you imagine the problems that crosses, not just with the big European bins that we put outside, but the amount of cars that are there, people coming to and fro this time of year when everybody's out the back garden, disturbing all the neighbours. We have 7 of them very close together in one small street. But in Corbychair alone, we have something like, and this is about a year old, these figures, over 260 HMOs. That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot, Chair. For example, the 60 in Wellingborough, there was, and there's about 87 in Kettering and 15 in Rushden. So, you know, we've got to try and be fair of how we allow this to happen. And that means changing the way we do planning and getting that direction in there that makes people come through and have to get a licence for the smaller ones. Chair, I talk about the MHOs that we may know about. There's at least 500 unregistered HMOs in Corby. Unregistered. How do we ever, as a council, try and keep that under control, do the inspections, make sure everything's going? We can't. There's far too many in the one area. So, Chair, you know, it's a straightforward thing. I don't want to take your extra 30 minutes up. I want people to go home and enjoy the nice weather, etc. So hopefully we can all agree this. About 2-3 streets down from here, a woman phoned me. They're putting an MHO right beside the house me and my family brought up with. I said, that happens. And then she was crying. They're pulling the place apart. They've disturbed the things inside my house, the wall, the ceiling, etc. And the man that was running these shelters came straight up to her and her husband's face and said, why are you complaining about us? She'd lived in there with all her children. She'd bought the house. She wanted that house to be left to her family. She's moved out of Corby, never mind out the street, because of the disturbance that cost her. Six people, up to more, 10 people, 12 people living next door to you, and the disturbance that causes. 260 last year. I don't know what it is now, but it's far too many in a small area. So, Chair, and, you know, I'm looking at the executive to give guidance to our hard-working officers on how we manage to get that direction. And let's start where the most are. Let's do Corby, if not at least the Kingswood and Hazel East area, and get that direction in there to say enough is enough. I'm not saying we should stop them altogether. I don't think that's realistic, is it? It's not realistic. But we know there's far too many in the area, especially that we represent. But in Corby as a whole, compared to the rest of North Northamptonshire. So hopefully, Chair, this is a straightforward thing. Hopefully we can all agree that there's good and bad people that run HMOs that don't look after them. So we need to get that direction put in here. Yeah. So hopefully we won't need the extra 30 minutes because Councillor Smithers and the executive are all going to stand up and say, yes, we're going to help. We're going to help you in this area in Kingswood and Hazel East, and we're going to push for the officers to work towards getting that direction put in as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Zoe McGee, please.
Happy to second this motion and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Councillor David Brackenbury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillors McGee, for bringing this motion. And you may be surprised to know that we actually have a lot of sympathy with the points that you've made on this. You know, there clearly are a lot of houses in multiple occupation in Corby, as well as in other towns and indeed sometimes villages throughout North Northamptonshire. And they do play an important part in the housing mix. I mean, many of us in this room will, when they left school or gone to university or gone or entered the jobs market, will have lived in houses of multiple occupation. So it is important to make the point that houses in multiple occupation are a valuable part of the housing mix. Naturally, the behaviour of some residents in those houses in multiple occupation sometimes can lead much to be desired. Sometimes houses in multiple occupation have got issues with regard to the numbers of vehicles and rubbish collection and so on and so forth, and we do accept that point. In terms of the motion Mr. Chairman, that councillors McGee have raised. They are calling for Article 4 of the National Planning Policy Framework to be extended by removing permitted development rights for smaller houses of multiple occupations, that is between 3 and 6 inhabitants. And of course, the difficulty with that is that the National Planning Policy Framework does not allow, or it makes you have to have a complex, argued evidence base to extend Article 4, which has to then go to the Secretary of State for inspection and approval. So by itself, extending Article 4 might be a somewhat impracticable step, but we do recognise that there is a lot of work that does need to be done in terms of houses of multiple occupation in towns in North Northamptonshire, obviously Corby being a one. I also note your point, Councillor McGee, about unregistered houses in multiple occupation. You're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. This is a blight on the landscape, and we don't want to see unregistered, unlicensed houses in multiple occupation, because there's all kinds of dangers which can emanate from that to the residents themselves and to the conditions in which they live, and to fire risks and various other, other risks that those residents can face. So, what we're proposing, and I hope here we may have a rare outbreak of consensus in this room. We hear what you say. We're suggesting amending the motion, and I'll read this slowly, and I'll be interested to see what members think about this. North Northamptonshire Council recognise the densities of houses and multiple occupation in certain areas in the council area, and wish to work with officers and stakeholders to ensure the highest standards of licensing and governance of dwellings in this category. We wish to work in partnership with landlords, tenants, the council and other stakeholders to utilise the whole suite of regulation and planning requirements, which could include Article 4 regulation in some circumstances, to ensure strong governance of houses of multiple occupation for the benefit of all those living in such dwellings. The Council also recognises that houses in multiple occupation play an important part in the housing mix and are a vital resource for many people. We ask the Council to report back at the next full Council with a plan on how to achieve this aim. So that is an amendment which I'm proposing to the motion, and I commend it to Council.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second the motion, and I reserve the right to respond.
Councillor Ainslow, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brackenbury. I was going to speak in support of Councillor McGee, but having heard that amendment and looking at my colleagues here, I feel as though that's a good way forward. I actually sat on the EAP for planning with you, with your other members, where we discussed HMOs, and we did recognise that there were areas with high density, and in Wellingborough in particular, which is where I'm from, those Victorian areas down by the station where Victorian family homes have been converted into HMOs cause huge problems with parking, refuse and noise. We recognise that there's a need for this type of housing when there are not enough houses that people can afford. And I think this suggestion, Councillor Brackenbury, is a good step forward, and actually shows how an EAP could work, how an EAP can start to form policy rather than just be a talking shop. Thank you.
Councillor, sorry, I'm a bit slow off the mark there. I should make it apparent that you are debating the amendment.
Yes, I realise that, and
I'm sorry,
I was speaking
I should have said
in
that at
support.
the start. Jean Addison, please. Councillor Jean Addison.
No further comments, Chair.
Oh, fine, thank you. Councillor Smithers, please.
Sorry, no need to speak now.
So we move straight to the vote, or do we come back to Councillor McGee first? Councillor McGee, please.
This Councillor McGee? Yeah, okay,
Yeah, that
good.
one.
Just checking in. I was going to give an insight into HMOs in my area, and I myself have lived in HMOs down in Brighton when I was a student. And to let you in behind the door, one of them, my oven set on fire within about a week of living there, and the other one, when we moved in, there was a huge hole in the wall. So I completely sympathise with this, and I look at this as a good step. I think this is a reoccurring pattern and a reoccurring theme in this council that HMOs are causing a problem for our residents. So I'm pleased to see that we are starting to do something about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brackenbury would like to exercise his right of reply, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly won't take long in winding up. I welcome the support of members on this amendment. I do think it's really great to actually see us working together on a matter which we, I think, all agree. I'm grateful that Tom Pursglove MP has taken quite an interest in this. So we are, across the political spectrum, going to take a serious look at houses in multiple occupation, and celebrate the good aspects of it. They are important. People do need to live in them. I also, and my last point, Mr. Chairman, really, is to praise the work that has been done on the planning policy EAP, who has considered this matter, and it's a pat on the back for this system of governance. Those committees work out policy which comes forward to executive or sometimes council for consideration, and there's an awful lot of unsung, really hard work that goes on in these EAPs right across the party divide. Once again, Chairman, thank you for your indulgence, and I commend the amended motion to Council.
Councillors, we will now vote on the amended motion. John McGee, you have the chance to come back for the substantive motion. So all those in favour of the amendment, please. All those against? Abstentions? That is carried.
Unanimous.
Now we're debating the substantive motion.
Now we wish to debate the substantive motion as amended.
Point of order, Chair. Would it, if we've agreed on the amended version, would it be helpful if the substantive motion be withdrawn if councillors agree?
That is just a substantive motion now.
Oh, right, thank you.
Chair, if I may, I think we went a wee bit out of process there, but what I will say, and I should have been asked if I come to the Constitution if we accepted that and went on as somebody that proposed the motion. But Chair, because we all went away, so I'm going to be quick. I accept what's been said by Councillor Brackenbury and I welcome it. But the proof is in the pudding. So I will be closely watching what happens in our areas of high density with HMOs. And if I need to have another motion in 3, 4, 5 months' time, I will do that because that's my role and that's how we support our people. But Chair, I do welcome a move forward. I do welcome that. And I will go out and let my residents know at least we're looking very closely at it. But when Councillor Brackenbury and the other officers look at this, please look at how we do the inspections, the policing, etc. Because we don't have enough staff to be able to do it to every HMO, but it's very important we do. Because I know there's HMOs with people that's turned their sheds into bedrooms. Not acceptable for anybody to live like that, is it? But it's happening. So we need to have that policing better. But Chair, I welcome what's been said and I look forward to that report coming back at the next full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. It's good to see you two getting on so well. That wraps up that then. Urgent items. There are no. Oh, God, have we got?
We do have to.
We need to vote on the substantive motion. All those in favour, please.
Yeah, it's substantive motion is amended. Substantive motion is
Isn't it? We have to vote on. We're voting on the motion as amended. So same as last time. Yeah, that's it.
All those against?
Okay. Yeah, that's carried. That's carried.
That's carried. I'm too tired. Urgent items. There are no urgent items on this occasion. Thank you, councillors and officers. That now completes the business of the meeting. I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a bit confusing, all that, isn't it?
Jason?
Yeah.
Jason?